Chris Graham.
Welcome to Street Knowledge. I am Chris Graham, and recording this on Friday afternoon, about 24 hours away, actually less than 24 hours away from UVA's kickoff 12 noon on Saturday. UConn in town, and first of probably many noon kickoffs for Virginia in Charlottesville. That happens a lot. You play early in the day when your games are of less interest, and that's not a knock, it's just reality. So UVA 1-1 hosting UConn 1-0, and the Cavs are actually 10-point favorites against the Huskies, who had to miss their game last week. Their game last week with number 22 South Florida canceled due to Hurricane Irma. So just the early season win, a 27-20 win over FCS opponent Holy Cross. So both these teams come in. Neither has a win over a 1A opponent, FBS opponent. I'm still not a fan of the FBS, FCS designations that we use these days. But in any case, 27-20 win, and actually, Virginia won 28-10 in its game against FCS opponent William & Mary, and never trailed in that game. Led 14-0 at halftime. Pretty much sailed to that win. The 27-20 win for UConn over Holy Cross, which was picked fourth in the Patriot League this year, 17 Patriot League. Holy Cross led 27 at halftime, and it was 20-14 in the fourth quarter before UConn rallied to take that win out. Missed an extra point late that kept Holy Cross in that game, and so that's what we got as far as UConn goes. New coach Randy Edsall is the old coach Randy Edsall. Randy Edsall left UConn famously several years ago after taking that program they played in one of those New Year's Day games before he left. Had helped that program rise from, they were once an FCS level program. I think they were officially still 1AA back then. Helped to take the program from that level to the FBS level, and then guided them to some bowl wins and big bowl games, and then left sort of in the middle of the night to go to Maryland, where things didn't work out very well, to say the least there. I think, if I have this right in my mind, Edsall, in the middle of his fifth season, was let go. And so he ends up back at UConn. And after a lot of hurt feelings that he had left in his wake after leaving UConn, that time many years ago, taken over a program that since he left just never got back on track. 3-9 last year record. Now, that 3-9 record last year included a win over Virginia, so a team that got its coach fired still was able to beat Virginia last year. 13-10 early season win for the Huskies up in Connecticut, and and off a impromptu bye week, and I don't imagine a lot of these games are going to be rescheduled. There's a lot of maneuvering going on. Actually, that's a conference game, so that would have to be rescheduled, but there's a lot of maneuvering going on. We've seen ACC schools, AAC schools, which is a conference that UConn plays in, other schools, other conferences affected. Not just moving the game itself that's impacted directly, but ACC, for example, moving the Miami-Florida State game, which had been scheduled for this week, moved it sometime back in October. Had to move some other games around to accommodate that. Lots of back and forth as far as that goes. Impact of Irma still really, for those of us outside of Florida in the Southeast, we're still starting to make sense of just how devastating that really was and is and will be for folks in Florida, and will be for some time to come. So back to the UVA football game. They're playing a team that's coming off that bye week that had a struggle to win over an FCS opponent at home. Now let's break down this UConn team. They were outgained actually by Holy Cross 447-438 marginally. And the Crusaders also forced 2 UConn turnovers and held a big margin in time of possession, over 33 minutes time of possession for Holy Cross in that game. Now, UConn was able to get its running game going a bit, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns from redshirt freshman running back Nate Hopkins. 2 of those touchdowns in the second half, very important, as the Huskies were rallying. Backup quarterback Bryant Sharefs came in off the bench. Former 2-year starter, so interesting that he was on the bench to start the game. He lost a job in training camp to transfer David Pendell. Pendell put up good numbers from a standpoint, 19 of 28 in his 2 quarters plus of action, 154 yards. Only led the Huskies, though, on 1 touchdown drive, so Sharefs was brought in to try to provide a spark as UConn was trying to desperately avoid a loss at home to an FCS opponent in Edsall's return to the sidelines. And Sharefs actually, got things moving. 9 of 13 passing, 124 yards, touchdown pass. Led the Huskies on those 3 touchdown drives. And so Sharefs was listed as the starter for last week's game on the depth chart for the South Florida game. And it's curious. I tried to go to the UConn website to get an updated depth chart for this week. Could not find one. So I'm just going to go on the assumption that Sharefs will be the starter. He'll be at least listed as a starter this week coming in, given that he was going to be the starter last week. So, interesting. And Sharefs is a quarterback that can give Virginia problems. And I say that, and then I kind of laugh, and then Virginia defense has done well this year. We'll break down Virginia a little bit later in this, but defensively, the one weakness has been trying to contain scramble plays. We saw last week. Peyton Ramsey, the Indiana backup quarterback who came in to try to get things moving after Indiana was stalling out drives in the first half. He's a guy that can pick up yards with his feet. In the first week, William & Mary's quarterbacks were able to gain, I think I figured it out when I did the math, it was over 90 yards rushing on scramble plays for the Tribe quarterback. So Sharefs is a guy that can also keep the chains moving with his feet. He's the kind of guy that you have to stay disciplined in your rush lanes. Offensive lines want to create the pocket to give their quarterback the ability to, have some protection around him as he's looking downfield to find receivers. Defensive linemen have to have enough discipline. The front seven has to have enough discipline to keep the escape lanes closed off as much as possible, as they're also trying to get pressure on the quarterback. So Sharef's the kind of quarterback that can take advantage if things break down in that respect. Looking at the UConn offense, Hergy Mayela, hope I'm pronouncing that name right, 6'2" junior wideout, 106 yards on 9 catches in the opener against Holy Cross. Caught 23 balls a year ago. He seems to be the top target. Also, 6'3" redshirt freshman wide receiver Keon Dixon, 5 catches, 38 yards. So a couple of big targets out there, 6'2" and 6'3" on the perimeter. We'll test the Virginia cornerbacks. UConn defense got burned in the Holy Cross game. I mentioned that Holy Cross actually outgained UConn in that game, and 358 yards through the air. Their ground defense was solid, 89 yards on 26 carries, and that's a question mark for Virginia going in. Virginia's offensive line famously has allowed 4 sacks of quarterback Kurt Binkert, and also has only produced enough holes, if you want to say. The running game only 147 yards in the first 2 weeks on 57 carries. So Virginia's offensive line is a weak point of that offense, which is not a good weak point to have. Good skill players all around, just no ability to have time to do anything. And that said, the passing game for the pass defense for UConn was suspect. I can get that out. In their win over Holy Cross. And so if Binkert can find time, and if the offensive line can give him just enough time to pick apart the defense downfield, at least prospects for success there. Binkert sacked just once last week. I mentioned 4 times on the season, but he's still, there was another play. We remember the forced fumble that was returned for a touchdown by Indiana, overturned after it was determined that the hit on Binkert was an illegal hit, helmet-to-helmet hit that caused that fumble. So there's that's emblematic of the first 2 weeks of the season for Binkert. He's been under fire, and Also under fire from fans last week. A lot of throws downfield that were nowhere near. But, watching the game tape of that, wow, I got to tell you, it's hard to criticize Binkert. When your offensive line isn't creating space for you, creating time for you, the best thing you can do is just get the ball away, and hopefully not in the area where it can be intercepted. Binkert was criticized. The various accounts. Scott German, Augusta Free Press writer, had Binkert 0 for 6 on passes of over 20 yards at some point in the fourth quarter. I've seen as many as 10 passes attributed to that level. Nothing official. We don't see the same level of detailed stat keeping in college football as you do in the NFL. But that said, a number of deep balls thrown, none completed. And, no interceptions, no turnovers for this team in the first 2 weeks, which is significant. Virginia, I had to note here, the streak had been 42 straight games dating back to 2013 where Virginia had committed at least one turnover. They've gone back-to-back games without a turnover. Now, a 1-1 record to show for that. Special teams play was key last week in a bad way for Virginia. But at least the offense valuing the ball and back-to-back games with no turnovers is significant. If this team can just improve its blocking, right? Just start blocking guys just a little bit better. Create just a sliver of running room for the running backs. Jordan Ellis and that group back there. Give Binkert time to find guys like Donnie Dowling and Olamide Zacchaeus. It could really be a different kind of thing offensively. This defense now, I talked about last week, gave up 318 yards to Indiana, a team that put up 450 on Ohio State in that opening night loss to the then number 2 Buckeyes. The defense is doing its job. It's ranked 5th in the ACC in total defense, allowing 274 yards a game. And, that's against, William & Mary team is clearly a team that's in transition this year, but the Indiana team is a team that can move the ball. And so good numbers through 2 for the Cavs this year. Quinn Blanding leading the ACC in tackles. Are you surprised to hear that? 24 tackles on the season. Senior linebacker Michael Kaiser is tied for second. Are you surprised to hear that with 21? Those are the 2 guys, the 2 studs back there, the 2 future high NFL draft picks, 2 preseason second-team All-Americans anchoring that Virginia defense on this team that's still got a lot of work to do. This is a game I mentioned, Virginia, a 10-point favorite going into this one, which is so curious when you consider this is a team coming off a 2-10 season. They've got to win this year. They beat the FCS opponent on the schedule. Last year did not beat the FCS opponent, so that's an improvement. But when you look at the ESPN Power Index, and that's, I think there's a lot of value in that Power Index. Virginia ranked 81st this week in the Power Index. UConn's actually ranked 80th when I looked at their numbers. And so Virginia gets a big boost for being home, at home in this game, and also maybe I suppose a boost for UConn, being off of an unexpected bye week. Virginia's only got one other game this season where they will be, at least according to the ESPN Power Index, favored over an opponent. That's Boston College, and that's another one. Boston College right there in that same area in the low 80s of the ESPN Power Index. Virginia would get that boost for being home, and that's about it. And that's it. Looking at this stage, this far out. Boston College in its first 2 games, a narrow win over Northern Illinois, a big loss to Wake Forest. So, if you look at the schedule, 12 games on the schedule, 2 games in. This game with UConn, and then that game with Boston College would be the 2 that you would expect Virginia to be favored in. And then the rest, you want to win. I mean, if you're Coach Bronco Mendenhall, that program that's in its second year now, you want to see improvement. 3 wins wouldn't be improvement, and that's if you hold serve and beat the teams you're favored to beat, UConn and BC. That wouldn't 3 wins would technically be 1 more than 2 last year, but it would not be what anyone would think would be the expected level of improvement for a coach, in transition. Second year, yes, a lot of turnover in the first year, personnel-wise. You're just, a whole group came over. 14 assistant coaches came with Bronco from BYU, and no ties to the East Coast. Got to establish recruiting ties, and build those from the ground up. Not as easy to do as you might think. If you don't know the names of the coaches, even that you're calling for talent, that can be a tough road to hoe, so to speak. So, but you're year two, and I think it's reasonable to expect that this program would, if you're saying things are moving forward, you'd get 4, maybe 5 wins. I mean, obviously everybody wants to play in a bowl game, even though playing in the Military Bowl with a 6-6 record isn't worthy of putting a statue up on ground somewhere. It's still progress for a program that's been to 2 bowl games in the last decade. So, this work's cut out. It's a big game this weekend, I guess is what I'm getting at, because let's just assume that things don't go well this weekend. Virginia's a 10-point favorite. UConn, a team that had to rally to beat a lower quality, lower power strength FCS opponent at home in its first game 2 weeks ago. Didn't get to play last week again because of the situation with the hurricane. You lose this game this weekend, and this could be a 1-11 team if you're Virginia. This could be the start of a step back for a program that took a major step back last year. Last year's 2-10 finish. I know people want to give Bronco Mendenhall the credit. He took over for a coach that got fired, Mike London. London's last 2 teams won 5 games in 4 games. They didn't have winning records. London had 5 losing seasons in his 6 years in Charlottesville. But it seemed like, yes, okay, things got to the point where London needed to be let go if you wanted to try to start over and try to move forward with your program. But they were on the verge. It seemed like, to a lot of us, me included, that this was a program that had the talent in place and maybe just needed better coaching to put the guys in the right places to do the things they needed to do to be able to win games. 2-10 record last year, not competitive in most senses. In going 2-10, there was that near miss against Louisville that still makes no sense, except that Louisville down the stretch was really fading. But at the time, that was a huge surprise that Virginia played as close as they did, as well as they did against Louisville in that game, losing on a touchdown pass. I think it was a 30-yard touchdown pass inside the last 2 minutes of that game. Felt a lot like the Notre Dame game the year before in Charlottesville. But other than that, man, Richmond had a 30-7 lead in the fourth quarter. FCS Richmond had a 30-7 lead in the fourth quarter in Charlottesville. The Virginia Tech game, never competitive, never a game. The Georgia Tech game, never competitive in that game were the Cavs. There were a number of games where the Cavs were just not even registering in terms of competition in last year's schedule. And it wasn't a tough schedule, let's be honest about it. It wasn't a world beater schedule. You weren't playing an Alabama schedule last year. Florida State or Clemson. I mean, you don't even have to play Florida State or Clemson. 2 teams in our conference that have won national championships in the last 4 years. You don't see those guys on a regular basis. You see Louisville, Heisman Trophy winner. You'll see them again this year. That's your cross-division built-in opponent every year. But and the Coastal's tough, no doubt about it. But this is a job that should be something you can get done. And so this weekend's a key one. Now on the flip side, I being negative Nancy here, if you lose this game, you can go 1-11. You win this game. Now that doesn't say, oh yeah, you beat UConn, you're favored by 10 to win the game. You beat UConn, you're going to turn things around and go win 7 games. But it's something you can build on. It's a win over a 1A program, an FBS program. You had 2 of those last year, so you're already halfway there. And it's also taking care of business. Virginia doesn't play a lot these days as a favorite. I mentioned they'll be favored twice this year. After the William & Mary game, they were favored. They'll be favored twice this year against FBS opponents. There is pressure coming when you're supposed to win. And so Virginia has to win a game against an opponent that beat Virginia last year. So you get a win this weekend. It's not one of those things where we say, oh, well, all they did was beat UConn. It is a kind of thing. Now, next week's game, and we'll talk about that next week, but you go to a ranked team on the road, Boise State, flying across the country, playing on a Friday night on the blue field. national TV audience against a team that 2 years ago bitch slapped you in front of a national TV audience, also on a Friday night. I think it was the final score 56-14 in that game. I think it was 42-0 at halftime. I'm just kind of doing that from memory. So you want to go. You got to go play on the blue field. You got to fly across country, play on a Friday night. All this is going on. You want to go in at least as confident as you could possibly be, because that's a tough situation, to say the least. Boise State is playing great football right now. Big win over Washington State last week, for example. Last night, sort of mediocre, very, very vanilla win over New Mexico. But they're still winning games. They're still Boise State. And if the Cavs can go out at least with some sense of confidence, hey, we did what we were supposed to do. We beat UConn. We're flying about as high as we can at this stage, 2-1 going into that game. Who knows, right? Who knows? Maybe things work in the right direction. You go out there, though, with a loss, and the wheels can come off real quick. So, big game for the Cavs this weekend. For lots of reasons. You want to win every time you go out there, but this feels like a turning point kind of game for this team. I had a podcast earlier this week, wrote a column earlier this week where Scott German and I discussed on the podcast, and then I've further expounded in the column. Could it be possible that Bronco Mendenhall could be on a hot seat with a new athletics director coming in, a new university president announced just today, James E. Ryan, the dean of the graduate school at Harvard, former UVA law professor, UVA law graduate, deep ties to UVA. A lot of folks calling this a home run hire. Those are the words of Brian O'Connor. I don't think Larry Sabato quite called it a home run hire, but talked about what a great hire it is for UVA. Now, among the first things that Ryan, who will take office next summer, will do is he's got to hire an athletics director. Now, I doubt Virginia waits to hire a new athletics director until Ryan's formally in office. But now that you have a president in place, I think that you can safely say that Craig Littlepage, who's announced his decision to retire as soon as a new person, he'll serve until a new person is named. I mean, I think that ball can start rolling now. So, the question I asked then, the question Scott and I talked about, and I asked further in that column is, could Bronco Mendenhall be on a hot seat? Because anytime you hire a new athletics director, the football program at any FBS program, a lot of FCS programs, is your big money program. And so if you're being judged on the success of your program, and an athletics director, of course, like anyone else in the world working, you're judged on your success. If you're going to be judged on the success of your football program, which is your big money maker, you'd like to think you had some ownership in how that program was being run. And so it could be an issue that the next person hired is going to be able to say, is going to be given the latitude to say, I've got full autonomy over my program, including the football program. So if you're the new person, man or woman, whoever that may be, we've seen a lot of names thrown out there. Boo Corrigan, we've seen Val Ackerman, people with ties to UVA who've moved on to big and important things in the sports world. So if you're one of those people, or any of the other candidates who might pop up and surprise us to get this job, but you're going to want to say, I'm sure it's going to be a question as the interview process goes on. Hey, if you're going to be judging me on my success, do I get that ability to have the imprint on the program? It's hard to imagine that a 2-10 record last year, and maybe a 2-10 or a 1-11 this year, maybe even a 3-9 this year out of Bronco Mendenhall, is not going to at least put him on a hot seat. Very unlikely this year, but it could be an earlier hot seat than expected. It could be a next year hot seat. Who knows? Could be a this year hot seat. The best way to eliminate that is to go out there and get some wins. You like to think that a plucky team with a coach who can innovate can go out there. Now, Virginia's only favored. I mentioned 2 games against FBS opponents this year. They'll be favored this weekend. They'll be favored against BC, likely, when that game pops up in October. All right, so you're a underdog the other 8 times. That's what it is. Go out there and win a couple of those games. Go out there and do something special. Go out and beat a Miami or a Carolina. Surprise Virginia Tech for the first time in what feels like a century. You're gonna have to win a couple games like that to get fans back on your side. When you think about it that way, let's say you hold serve, you beat UConn this weekend, you beat BC next month. If you break the losing streak against Virginia Tech, fans will forgive a lot of stuff. That buys that right there is a ticket for a couple more years of football. No matter how bad things might be going around, right? But pull a couple of those upsets, beat a ranked team at home, sneak one on the road. Who knows? But you got a chance to show that, hey, you get one of those program building wins, we like to call them in the media business. That can, basically shows, hey, we don't have as much talent as the guys on the other sidelines, but we willed it. We made it happen. This is something that can happen. I know folks who listen, who read my columns. I shouldn't say ours. I don't want to throw anybody else under a bus here. I'll throw myself under the bus. Think that I'm a very negative analyst when it comes to UVA sports. I've been covering UVA sports for 20 plus years. I'm a UVA alum. I've got a V Sabres tattoo on my shoulder. I'm a fan as much as any of you folks are. And I want to see success. I can't call things other than how I see them, maybe unfortunately for me. But man, I go every time I go to a game, every time I watch one on TV, I want to see the guys in the orange and blue win. As much as you do, maybe more than you do. My weekend is ruined when Virginia loses a game. I hate it. The website traffic is what it is. From a business standpoint, from an analytical standpoint, I get to write about wins, I get to write about losses. So I've got a job to do. But man, I don't even want to watch SportsCenter after a Virginia loss. I don't want to watch. I don't want to see the highlights. I don't want to hear about anything. I don't revel in that misery. I want it to end as much as you guys do. And so I hope that things get in the right track this weekend. Let's put it that way. I like a lot of what I see. I think Bronco Mendenhall is a stand-up individual. He has to know how to coach football. He won 99 games at BYU in 11 years. He was an innovator of the 3-3-5 base defensive alignment. From a player standpoint, I've gotten to interview a lot of these guys one-on-one. Kurt Benkert, I like him. He's a stand-up young man. I love Kurt Benkert. I think he's got talent. He's got a great arm. I think highly of both Micah Kaiser and Quinn Blanding. I talked to them at the ACC football kickoff this past summer. I admire that they came back for their senior seasons at Virginia when they were both potential mid-round NFL picks this year. Now Blanding, going into 2018's draft class, stays healthy. He's a first-round pick next year. But both those guys could have signed. You could have gone to the NFL, been drafted third, fourth, fifth round, third roundish, maybe even late second roundish for Blanding this year. They'd be making money now. And of course, when you play football, it's no guarantee that just because you drafted higher next year, you can also get hurt. Anthony Poindexter's example is a great example. But they came back because they wanted to be part of what they thought was the turnaround of UVA football. And that said, they weren't going to win a championship this year, even if things worked out as rosy as possible for Virginia. But they came back because they wanted to be part of something. I admire that. So I root for these guys, and I want to see them win. And I hope that this weekend's the start of something good. And we'll kind of leave it at that. I think that's a great place to kind of finish things up. So tomorrow, 12 o'clock kickoff, I'll be live blogging from the press box at Scott Stadium. And please join us on that. What I do with that is I provide stat updates, score updates. So if you're out and about, on a Saturday afternoon, not watching the game necessarily, at least you get the score updates from me. If you just check Twitter, check the website, you can at least keep up with things that way. Also, for those who are following the game on TV and then maybe want to follow us also on your mobile phone sitting in front of the TV, whatever the case may be, I'm giving analysis, commentary, kind of breaking things down as the game is going on. And so that's a fun thing to do. Then after the game, of course, we have the game recap. We'll have the transcripts of the press conferences. We'll have columns. I'll go down to the locker room afterwards and take part in the Bronco Mendenhall press conference, a couple other press conferences with the players, the individual ones. So it's a wall-to-wall UVA football tomorrow on Augusta Free Press. And again, it starts at 12 o'clock with the noon kickoff. Actually, the live blog will go live around 9:30. It'll include the link to our game preview and some other information about the game, how you can watch it, and that kind of thing. So, UVA football Saturday at AugustaFreePress.com. And I'm the lucky guy who gets to be your host for that. Until then, thank you for listening. Have a great day.